Hey, welcome to the show. My name is Cary Weston, and glad you're here. This show is about 5 biggest mistakes people make in marketing. I'm sure there's obviously more than 5, and there's probably more egregious things that I'm going to bring up. But these are the 5 that come to mind as I was brainstorming this particular topic, thinking about trends and things that repeat themselves from situation to situation, industry to industry. A quick story though, before we get into the 5. This did make the list. It's a specific instance, but I'm not quite sure how you classify it. But years ago, there was a customer with a string of retail stores, and this is before the submit all your contest entries by digital. They put out slips of paper, and you'd fill in a piece of paper and put it in a box, and then once a week someone would collect it. They had 13 stores or something like that, and so somebody would go to all 13 stores and they'd dump all the contest entrants into a bag and pull out a winner and then start all over again. And they did this for 8 weeks throughout the summer. So by the end of the summer, they had a couple trash bags full of entries, right? People had filled out information, email address, all that kind of stuff to submit for this contest. And they got busy. And the fall turns into the winter into the spring, and it's time to plan for the next year's contest. They want to do it all over again, new set of prizes, new theme, that kind of stuff. And I asked them, what did you end up doing with all of the entries from last year's contest? Because the whole point of this was to create a list, right? Is to create an email list that you can communicate and promote the store and have outbound communications. And they said, well, we got so busy not only recovering and dealing, but planning in the business that we didn't get to it. So they literally opened up a closet, and there was a trash bag full of all of their entries, but they were ready to go at it again. So the moral there is, what are you working for, right? What's the goal? It's my favorite phrase, what's the goal? But if you're just putting all that time and effort just to give away a few bikes and maybe a grill, rethink it. So they had a gold mine of customer information that they weren't using, but they were ready to set out and do it again, right? And so that's something that shows itself in a variety of different ways. At times, doesn't necessarily have to be pen and paper with a retail contest, but I'm sure as you listen to the details of that particular story, there may be something that you are looking back and saying, we maybe do some things that don't make complete sense, but we do them because we do them. We get busy and we do them, and maybe they're not as valuable in the end as we thought they were going to be. And is there a way of correcting that, right? So my reason for sharing, the reason I share that story, and the reason I'll share the 5 mistakes that I wrote down here, the marketing mistakes that I see often, is to maybe get your idea treadmill going, right? So the idea treadmill, if you've ever been watching a movie, listening to someone talk, reading a book, and you start to drift off because something that was said or something that you read or something that you saw kind of triggered a thought or a memory or an idea, and before you know it, you're kind of in your own head, even though you're in the other environment, even though you've got a book open in front of you or a TV or a person, you've kind of drifted off for a little bit, right? You've kind of daydreamed. Well, I call that your idea treadmill. There's a number of things here that may trigger that for you. You may hear a mistake or a comment or a story or whatnot that kind of sends you off thinking, and that's good. That's the point of having discussions like this, sharing experiences and best practices and the do's and don'ts and all that kind of stuff, is so that you can kind of take a look at what you're doing in a new light and maybe being objective, right? What is the goal? What are we doing this for? How do we measure outcomes, right? So let's get to the 5. So number one is an overarching, this shows up in so many different ways, but number one is not thinking about the customer and making the customer the hero. And let me share with you a couple really specific and obvious ways that this pops up, okay? Number one is the we-you test, okay? The we/you test. And that's in the writing, the copy, the messaging that you're doing. Predominantly, this will show up on the website. It'll also show up in marketing copy. Maybe there's sales materials or whatnot. Social media, it'll show up too. But I would say the website is by far the biggest litmus test for the we-you test. And that's this. How many times are you saying we or I, if you're single, versus you, right? The ability for us to see success and see that you're thinking about us as a customer really relies on how you are talking to us, right? So the we test, if you have more we's than you's, meaning we do this and we are this and we provide this and we're the best at that, the more we's you have, the more selfish the copy is becoming, and the less it's about making the customer the hero. You're really, by default, you're making the company the hero, and you shouldn't do that, right? The features and benefits of what you do are great, but if they can't relate to what somebody needs, if they can't be empathetic to the position that people are in, the frustrations, the goals, the questions, all that kind of stuff. If we're not saying you, we get you, right? We can help you. The ability for us to get lost in trying to promote ourselves is very, very common in marketing. And I would just ask, take a step back, and by looking at the copy, the messaging, the approach, the materials you're using, who's really the hero, right? Not thinking about the customer, not being obsessed over what they need, not utilizing your own experience, by the way, to head them off at the past questions and fears you know people are going to have and addressing them up front, right? Thinking about the objections, thinking about the experiences. What are they going to need to see, hear, and feel in order to make a confident decision, in order to trust you, right, with the money? Because we're exchanging money for perceived benefit. And in the simplest terms, we just need people to understand that we're the best option for that, right? And so making them the hero, making the customer the hero, or not doing it, right, is how it made the list, is not thinking about the customer. Another way this will come up is not just in language, but in actions. So here's another really popular way, and this just pops up, is not having pricing information, not getting information that buyers want without having to do something at your convenience and not theirs. Meaning I have to schedule a demo, I have to talk to a salesperson, I have to jump through hoops in order to get a number, a price range even, right? So the ability for folks to be appreciated and respected in the information you're providing is how this shows up. Not doing that is a mistake that I list, not thinking about the customer at number one. Number two, how many times have you thought we need more leads, we need more customers, we need more business, right? If you felt that way, you're not alone. Number two is not having a nurturing system, what I just call a nurturing system, not having a system for tracking leads. How this shows up is phone calls are made, emails are sent by customers, or forms are filled out by customers who are looking or have questions about your business or looking into your business. And if instant gratification is not met, meaning if somebody doesn't buy right then, I'm very, very surprised at how many times those inquiries, emails, phone calls, potential opportunities end up on a Post-it note or scribbled into a notepad, never to be seen again. Even emails that come in kind of sit in the inbox if they're not an instant sale. And then most of the time, the prospect, and this is something that makes your head scratch, most of the time the prospect will reach back out and say, did you get my message? I'm looking to talk to somebody. They'll actually chase you to try and get someone to pay attention to them, right? And it's because we get busy and we don't have systems in place. We think the Post-it note is going to be good enough. The scribbling on the notepad is going to be good enough. We think the email, saving it in the inbox is going to be good enough. So having a way in which you can say, this lead came in, this inquiry came in, this opportunity came in, whatever it might be, and having a single source of truth there. Okay, so a single source of truth being one place where you know that if you or others look, you can see not only those leads that we're talking about, those potential sales opportunities, but you can also see what's happening to them. Have they been paid attention to? Do you have folks reaching out to them? What's the situation? And it doesn't have to be expensive, complex software in order for this to work. This could be something like Trello, right? It could be free software like Trello that allows you to create and customize columns for instances like this. So leads come in and you can manage them and see them and share them and whatnot. Could be a spreadsheet, could be anything. There's no real excuse anymore for not having a single source of truth when it comes to organizing and nurturing things, right? So number 2, not having a system in place where you are capturing and organizing and reviewing the folks that are trying to do business with you. You work very hard, by the way, to earn the opportunity, to earn people's visibility, right, and interest in your company. And so the least that we can do is respect that effort that you put into it so that we don't let leads go right through your hands, right? So I think number 2, not having a system in place to capture it. So how do you do that? How are you in your business? If someone calls in, are you the Post-it note, scribble in a notepad kind of crowd, or do you have a system in place? And by the way, if you are not in the office, you personally are not in the office, is there a place that someone else could see that, right? Is there a single source of truth? Right? Number 3, back to my favorite quote, what is the goal? I've sat in a number of meetings where I didn't know why I was there. I've watched people spend money and I didn't know why they were doing it. I've seen people put together campaigns, create creative, spend money on advertising, and I can stump them with a very simple question of what is the goal? And then we can slash that and say, what is the goal / what does success look like? Okay. So one of the biggest mistakes that I see is people spending money and doing things to simply spend money and to do things. Right? And if we don't think about what's the goal, what does success look like? Why are we doing this? Right? And number 4 is how do I measure? These go hand in hand, right? But what is the goal? Like, who am I talking to? Why am I doing this? Why is this a good idea? The answer of I've always done this, or I think this is right, or I need to do something comes up far more than I would hope that it would. It comes up a lot, right? So I would say in your business, whether you have a large advertising budget or whether you have small efforts of people, or maybe you're creating campaigns, whatever you're doing, can you answer the simple question of what's the goal and what does success look like? If you can't do it very easily, then we might want to reconsider the effort, the time, the money that you're putting into it, right? It doesn't mean you need a very complicated marketing plan and a multi-step Gantt chart and all of this. You just need to understand what the answer is to that question. What is the goal and what does success look like, right? So let's take a look at the number 4. How do I measure? So if we know the goal and we know what success looks like, we need to be able to measure it. And measuring should be something other than feelings, right? It looks good, feels good. Quick side story. I've been an agency owner for a long time. And in the agency I owned previously, we had a client that wanted to do a television commercial. And the question is, what's the goal, right? It wasn't the best use of the time or money, but this is what they really wanted to do. And even though you can give the best advice and the best guidance, doesn't mean that people always follow it, right? So you do your best. Sometimes you plant your flag and sometimes you don't. So they went forward and we made a TV campaign and we put them on air. And I can tell you, just as the day is long and the sun comes up, that I had no idea what the goal was going to be, or how we measure it for that matter. And again, they went forward with it. Well, come to find out, the client was absolutely thrilled. Absolutely thrilled. Got feedback and said it was the best campaign and we did a remarkable job and it was highly effective. And when I asked them, what basis do you say that? What is it that's making you feel that way and share that with you? And he said, I was at the grocery store and 2 people came up and said, I saw you on television. So sometimes the goal is simply to have somebody in the grocery store come up and say, I saw you on television, right? They made that decision. They went forward. But there are times when things get done and things get created and money gets spent and time gets put into it where we don't know the goal and we don't know how to measure, right? So I would say the better off that you can in answering those 2 questions. What's the goal? What does success look like? And then how are we going to measure it? Are we going to measure it by an increase in web leads, an increase in phone calls, people asking for free samples, emails that come in, right? Sales. There's always a number. There's always an activity. And it doesn't have to be an absolute measurement. It just could be an indication. But there should be something other than somebody says, I saw you at the grocery store to be the measure of the success that you're putting in, right? And I think number 5, from a common mistake of the 5 biggest mistakes I see in marketing efforts, is the lack of communication internally. So marketing, to me, in my definition of marketing's role is to really make the sales as easy as possible, shortening the sales cycle, making resources that helps the sales do their job, right? Creating visibility to have more sales opportunities, creating resources to help the sales team be faster, more efficient, more thorough, more valuable. So marketing's position, in my point of view, is to help sales in any way possible. So the customer of marketing is sales, in other words. But how many times, maybe this is in your company, maybe this is in a company you've been in, or maybe you just heard, but how many times do people live in silos, meaning we charge folks to create marketing materials and marketing campaigns and marketing messages, but they don't communicate with sales or operations. They're kind of out on their own island. And sales is doing their things, and marketing is doing their things, and operations is doing their things. And the lack of internal communication means that people are driving with very limited, right, information to do their job. And so how do you fix that? Well, with marketing, I think having the ability of communicating with sales on a regular basis, with operations, talking about what are customers asking, what do the sales calls look like, what kind of questions are you getting, what objections are you getting, what are people thinking about and worried about. All of that should go into the process of marketing's work, right? How do we offset and give resources and create more informed prospects? How do we get more people coming in? How do we shorten that sales call? How do I know what to talk about? How do I know, by the way, what's resonating, what people are excited about, right? What problems are you solving? If we don't talk to customers and we don't talk to sales folks, then it's tough for us to know. And then we're just guessing. And that's when we end up just doing things to do things. And back to what's the goal and how do I measure, right? Marketing's job is not just to create. If you're in marketing, by the way, your job is not just to create pretty social graphics, right? And send out emails and hope that it works. Your job is to work with sales to understand what's happening. How do I give sales as much resources, help, support as possible so that their job can be better, right? So I think the 5 here that I have, not thinking about the customer, not having a system to track and manage those leads that come in, not understanding what the goal or what success looks like and the efforts, time, and money that we spend, not knowing how to measure what you're about to do, then not having internal communications on a regular basis so that sales and marketing and operations can be on the same page. Maybe you've got another one that I didn't bring up. Maybe you've got a story that you've seen, experienced, or done. I've got a ton of stories, and some of them don't fall into this category too. So if you have an idea, shoot it my way. Podcast website is practicalmarketingshow.com. These are my 5 biggest mistakes, and I'm sure that you've got some others that you can add. So if you do, I'd love to hear from you, okay? So what do I do this? I try to help folks make common sense decisions so they can get more results from the time, money, and effort spent in marketing their business. I know that you put a lot of time into this. If you're marketing folks, I know how frustrating it can be to not have information and answers or guidance to do your job, right? And so I'm trying to put out some basic common sense, experience-based best practices to help you, sales and operations, kind of get on the same page and, not make this list, right? Not make the mistakes, not be on the 5 biggest mistakes. Hope that was helpful to you. practicalmarketingshow.com. If you have any questions, shoot me a note. Until then, be well. Okay, talk soon.